Damn it! I was too greedy. It must have been those last 2 million that did it. I should have just let it go. I knew there was something wrong with that account. Damn it! Now they're getting close. I guess they thought I didn't know about it yet. That might have helped. I still had time to hide and make sure they couldn't track me any further. Fortunately, I had a plan for that. So who am I and who is trying to track me down? Who I am now is not that important, as this identity will soon disappear completely. In 2 hours, I'll be a completely different person. The trail the hunters are following will be cut off before they can get enough information to realize who I am. What I am, or soon will be, is a hacker. I am a very good hacker. I'm also a very evil hacker with a very select list of targets. I go after the drug cartels. I track down their bank accounts and, anonymously of course, supply evidence to the appropriate authorities. I have on my personal conscience the convictions of 4 politicians, at least 50 police officers, a dozen soldiers in various countries, and so many small-time traffickers I can't even count them. I have also siphoned over $100 million out of their coffers. Of course, I take a percentage of that amount for myself, but about 80% goes to various charitable organizations. Most of them deal with drug addiction and rehabilitation programs. Why, you ask? It's simple. My little sister got involved with the wrong guy. I didn't like him very much, but she wouldn't listen to me. I did the best I could, but she made her choice. I tried my best to take care of her after our parents died. I had always been good with computers, but the 2 dark years I spent in depressive isolation after identifying what was left of her body turned me from very good to almost magical. I spent those 2 years alone in the basement of my parents' old house, learning dark secrets and how to manipulate them. I learned the code. I learned how to navigate the dark web. I discovered backdoors in most security programs. Sometime during those 2 years, the DEA got their hands on some very important information about the drug gang that tortured and killed my sister. Unfortunately, rival gangs somehow got the information that the gang in question was turning over government evidence to others to try to cut a deal. Gangs act faster than cops, so the state saved a lot of money on lawsuits. So who am I running from? My guess right now is that it's either the Russians or North Korean hackers. While I'm not sure it's them specifically, I'm pretty sure they've been hired by the cartel I just withdrew about $30 million from. I really should have stopped at $28 million, but then I discovered another small account. I knew there was something wrong with it, but I was young, stupid, and still angry. Once that money was on its way through 40 different accounts in 6 countries, my counter-hacking programs sounded the alarm. Someone had installed a reverse tracking program on the account. They were looking for where the attack originated. That's going to take a long time. I used a botnet. They'd have to go through about 100 IP addresses before they could start traversing the chain of servers. I inserted the flash drive and did a few keystrokes and mouse clicks. 4 servers in Europe went down. 2 servers in China reformatted themselves 6 times. 1 server in Iran and another in America overwrote their entire memory with a random series of 1s and 0s. The trail leading to me was effectively broken, and there was no way to recover the data. 3 more mouse clicks and my carefully crafted machines were reduced to useless scraps of wires, plastic, and fried silicon. The abandoned building I'd been using burned down from an out-of-control homeless fire. Most of my broken computer system was stripped apart and tossed into random dumpsters around town. Hard drives and memory cards were burned in a desert bonfire along with all of my personal documents. Convinced that no information could be retrieved from the burning pile of debris, I got in the van and drove west. 4 days later, I arrived in Las Vegas. 5 years later. Honey? Could you please help me? The computer's not working again. I turned to my beautiful wife, Linda. Really, Mark? How is it possible for a 25-year-old man to be so bad with computers? What would you do without me? She said, giving me a quick kiss on the top of my head. A few quick clicks and keystrokes, and I went back to checking my email. Dinner will be ready in about half an hour. Thanks, sweetie, I replied, watching her walk back into the kitchen. It had been 2 years since Linda and I had gotten married. I still couldn't believe how lucky I was. Leaving my old life behind, I recreated myself. I worked as a truck driver at the local lumberyard. We had a union, so the pay was decent. I very carefully withdrew a couple $100,000 from one of my offshore accounts and bought a nice, modest 3-bedroom house on about an acre lot. Next to the house, I built a steel building to use as a store and warehouse. I also added a secret room to rebuild and modernize my computer system. It was a small storage room, but it had a raised floor that went up to access a staircase that led underground. If you didn't know how to open it, it looked like a regular concrete floor. I decided that I would give up hunting dealers and cartels for a while. I had plenty of money saved up in case I needed it, and it made sense to disappear and let things cool down. Still, I didn't want to lose my skills, and I needed to keep up with new technology. The store was dedicated to my hobby of assembling old muscle cars. My wife had absolutely no interest in it, so she never came into my store. It also gave me time and privacy to go online and play a little, and she never suspected a thing. You might wonder why I'm keeping this from her. The thing is, she knows me as a simple truck driver and mechanic who knows next to nothing about computers. Of course, when I met her and we started dating, I couldn't just go around introducing myself as a hacker nicknamed Ghost in the computer underground. For one thing, the feds were looking for me. I had committed several cybercrimes, and they also wanted to lock me in a room and use my skills for their own purposes. Second, they had some very bad criminal organizations on their target list, and if they caught me, my end would be very ugly and extremely painful. How long would our relationship have lasted after that? Do you even have to ask? After the wedding, we had a couple more questions. First, it was for her own safety. If she didn't know, they couldn't use her to get information. Second, it ensured that she wouldn't accidentally miss any information. Nah, it was better that she only knew the man she married. Okay, a little bit about my wife. First of all, she is the most beautiful woman on the planet, to me. I always read in these stories that every woman is always the most beautiful woman on the planet, and wonder how there can be more than one. I'm not going to lie to you. To you, she may only be above average, but to me, she is a goddess. Different looks and different strokes. 5 feet 6 inches tall, wavy copper bronze hair down to the middle of her back, emerald green eyes. Legs long, slender, trim, and tanned. Her face has a thin nose, high cheekbones, dimples when she smiles, full butterfly lips, and a proud chin that doesn't stand out too much. How did we meet? I was working at the lumberyard one afternoon when she came in. She needed a couple of boards to put some shelves in her new apartment. I happened to be near the salesman as he was placing her order and volunteered to fetch the boards. While we were picking out the order, she mentioned that she wasn't very good with tools. Of course, I offered to come over after work and install the shelves for her. My price was that she would buy a beer and let me have dinner the next night. Dinner turned to dancing. Sorry, guys and gals. No wild sex here. The date ended with nothing more than a chaste kiss on the cheek. The thing is, I was actually terrified of girls. I should probably explain a little bit here. When I stole all that money from the cartel, I was a skinny 19-year-old computer nerd 6'1", tall and 110 pounds. My sex life up to that point was non-existent. Since coming to Las Vegas, I had only had 3 experiences with prostitutes. The first one was pretty disappointing. It was standing on Fremont Street. I was horny and picked her up. We did it in the back seat of my car. I ejaculated, but she acted like a robot. The second time I was in a brothel in Parampa. At least she acted like she cared. The third time I was also in a brothel in Parampa. This time I had the necessary funds. I paid for the whole night and asked her to really teach me how to pleasure a woman. Now I was dating a woman I liked and not paying. Would she really think I was okay if I didn't pay her for telling me how great I was? It wasn't until the 5th date that we had sex. I took her to dinner at the Stratosphere. From there, we moved to a hot dance club with a striptease. After a bottle of expensive wine at dinner and a few shots at the club, in between dancing for over 2 hours, we returned to my house. As long as I made her happy, I was fine. Linda and I dated for about 6 months before I proposed to her. 6 months later, we were married. We were happy together. She worked as an accountant for a large national company with an office in Las Vegas. She made good money there, and we lived quite well on our incomes combined. I never had to look into my secret accounts. We went to nice restaurants, attended shows, had a nice pontoon boat on the lake, and we both drove nice cars. Our sex life was very good. Usually, when I got home from work, I would go to my store and mess around for a couple hours before dinner. About half the time I worked on one of my machines, and the other half I spent in my room playing on the computer. I wasn't really doing anything wrong, just hacking into places I wasn't supposed to go. I wasn't actually taking anything or entering anything into the system. I was just sneaking in and looking around to tighten up my skills. Sure, I could have stolen a bunch of data and money, but I didn't want to leave a trail. Best to just sneak in and look around without anyone knowing of my presence. After dinner, we would settle on the couch and watch a movie before heading to bed. Sometimes we'd have sex for hours before bed, and sometimes we'd just melt into each other's arms. I continued to pretend that I was completely ignorant of technology. After all, who would look at a man who could barely check his email and think he was one of the most wanted hackers in the world? All the while, I've been hacking into the computer systems of banks, governments, and large companies. I've also reconfigured the army of bots on personal computers that I used to have. I masked my location by initiating hacks from foreign servers, sometimes from multiple servers at the same time. About 6 months ago, I noticed that Linda became a little more tense. Although it didn't really seem like such a big problem. Sex had decreased from about 4 times a week to twice a week. She was working longer hours and was tired when she got home. Most of the time, she would go straight to the shower, eat dinner, and then go to bed. I asked her, and she said something about a big account they were trying to get their hands on. It seemed plausible. Sometimes she would call me from the office on Friday and let me know that she was going to go to happy hour with a few other employees after work. She already did this often enough that I didn't bother. After about 6 months, I asked how long it would be. By my calculations, by this time, they should have either gotten the bill or lost it. Linda said it would probably be another week or two, and then things would settle down again. I decided she needed some pampering since she was working so hard, so I bought her an all-day spa package for this Saturday. She was thrilled when I handed it to her on Wednesday night. Finally, Saturday came, and at 9 in the morning, she headed to the spa. With a quick kiss, she headed out the door. She wouldn't be back until 4 in the afternoon. I grabbed my coffee and headed to the workshop to finish assembling the engine I had on my bench. After about an hour, I took a break and went to my computer lab. Up until this point, I had deliberately avoided hacking into Linda's comp. It was a sort of don't litter in your kitchen thing. I was adamant about that too. I didn't mess with the company I worked for myself, and I wouldn't mess with the company she worked for. After I logged in and checked my security programs, I was curious about the big account. Maybe I should see what it is and maybe take a look around their servers to see what's out there. Just a cursory look around, and then try to hack into the new client system. Their security was child's play. It took me a couple minutes to get inside. First stop was Linda's computer. She was working on a project, so from there I was supposed to be pointed in the right direction. It's weird. Nothing special about the new big client stood out. I checked a few keyword searches for proposal, new client, proposal, and a few others related to trying to get a new account. Nothing. I started going through her folders. And then I found a locked folder labeled Photos for James. What? Why does Linda have a folder with pictures of that little IT weasel? Yeah, I knew who James was. I'd met him a few times at the corporate events I went to with Linda. I didn't like him very much. Even though Linda thought she was pretty good with computers, and compared to other people she still couldn't compare to me. I opened the folder in a matter of seconds and stepped inside. To say I was shocked was an understatement. There were dozens of nude pictures of Linda in her office. I sat there, staring numbly at the pictures. In that moment, it felt like a part of me had died. After about 15 minutes, if the clock on my computer is to be believed, I came out of that state and started thinking about how I would get back at her as soon as she got home. Divorcing this bitch was a foregone conclusion. It was still a few hours until she got home, so I continued to look for more information. I figured it all started about 6 months ago when I first noticed a change in her. I pulled up her emails and was shocked even more. Several of their email conversations indicated that this was much more long-term than I thought. It looked like they had been lovers for about a year, even before she met me. If that was the case, why did she start dating me in the first place? What was going on? I found another letter in which she mentioned accounting errors by several of her big clients, as well as their own company. Then there was something about an offshore account. I switched to James's computer. There were more pictures of Linda on there. A few showed her in a motel room and in another man's bedroom. James was much better at computers than Linda, but still no match for me. I needed more time, so I copied James and Linda's computers and their folders on the company network to a free disk on my server. Out of habit, I checked the personnel folder on the server. I stopped for a moment when I saw my name in one of the folders. I copied it. Before I left the network, I had installed some spyware on both computers as well as the server. It automatically forwarded everything they did to my computer. Needless to say, work on my machines went on the back burner for a while. Linda came back from the spa and thanked me with a long night of amazing sex. Yes, I was disgusted with her for what she was doing, but I'm a guy. I wouldn't pass up the opportunity to do it with a beautiful, enthusiastic, and energetic woman. She could be the devil incarnate and I'd still celebrate. Ah, yes. To me, she was the devil incarnate. The little head didn't care and the big head decided to just go along for the ride. Sunday came and I was back at my store again. Linda was still asleep when I got up, so I took the opportunity to open her phone and install spyware on it. Text messages would be secretly copied into my computer system, and all of her phone calls would be listened to and digitally recorded on a separate hard drive. I will also be able to track everything she does on the internet. Linda left around 10 o'clock in the morning. She said she was going to meet up with one of her friends to go shopping. The friend-finding app on her phone was turned off, and I didn't want to accidentally notice that it was on, so I hacked into her car's internal GPS to follow her. Surprisingly, she actually drove to the mall. Once I was sure she wasn't coming back anytime soon, I went back to the house and got her laptop. The first thing I did was copy everything on the laptop to another hard drive. Then I downloaded the keylogger program and set up the camera for remote access. I didn't think I'd have much time before I had to return her laptop to where she left it, but I figured I could get a quick look at her browser history. That's when I discovered the second email address. I also noticed that she had logged into a bank in the Cayman Islands several times. I'll have to take a look at that later. I wiped some grease and oil on my hands and face to look like I was really working on the car when I heard that Linda had come home. Shower, dinner, movie, then bed. For the next week, I continued to play the ignorant, caring husband. Every evening I went to the shop, pretending to work on one of my cars for a couple of hours. Before returning to the house, I would dutifully slather myself with lube. In reality, I was going through the mountains of information I had gathered. It was on Tuesday night that I read a text message between Linda and James that caught my attention. James was warning her about erasing her history after using my laptop. Why did she need my laptop? Her laptop was working fine. Sure, I had set up my laptop to connect to my servers as soon as I bought it, but I had never thought about spying on myself. A dozen keystrokes and mouse clicks later, the problem was solved. The following evening, as I was sorting through the day's updates from their work computers, another stream of data started coming in. I quickly realized it was from my personal laptop. Turning everything else off, I began to study the new stream. It looked like there were money transfers going on. I turned on the laptop's camera and switched the stream to another screen. On my computer, Linda was working. She had a Bluetooth in her ear. The microphone picked up her voice as she spoke. On a third screen, I put up a live feed of her phone conversation. I watched and listened as Linda, following James's instructions, transferred about $50,000 from a dummy account at their company to a bank in the Cayman Islands. And they used my computer to do it. Soon she finished, deleted the history for that day, and logged out. What was going on here? I hadn't yet had time to review my personnel file from my HR folder because it didn't seem as important as other files. But now everything had changed. I felt like I had been assigned as a computer security consultant. I really respected the details they used in creating my fake documents. James had obviously hired me since he was the head of their IT department. I also discovered several payments for my services. Of course, they all went into an account in the Cayman Islands. Let's recap. I was unknowingly hired as a computer security consultant. Linda and James used my computer and IP address to transfer large sums of money from a fake account at their firm to an offshore bank. Furthermore, Linda and James were having an affair before I even met Linda. I was beginning to realize I was being set up. It was time to shift gears. Now that I understood what was going on, I needed to realize how bad it was and figure out what to do about it. It was bad. Checking the Cayman Islands account, I saw that there was almost $10 million in it. Checking the transfers, I verified that they had been doing this since about 6 months after Linda and I got married. In addition, they were not very delicate in trying to hide which computer was used to steal the money. Worse, a deeper examination of the personnel file in my name revealed several red flags. Yes, when things went south, I was the one in the kill zone. What am I supposed to do now? Surprisingly, acting normal around bitch turned out to be not that hard. I just let Little Head call the shots when she was around. She wanted me? Yes, I took every opportunity to do that to her. The following Saturday, I went through her emails for the time we had been dating. That's when I found out that they had chosen me as their scapegoat from day one. Yes, she thought I was attractive, and that sex with me would definitely not be a chore, but she was a little concerned about my apparent lack of computer skills. James decided that would be a bonus. The less I knew about working with computers, the less likely I was to reveal their plan. But they didn't. Now I needed a plan for revenge. I started setting things up. First of all, a couple new bank accounts were created. Then I activated the bot army I had created. Most of the bots would be a distraction, but I had one small group that could be tracked, although it would be difficult. Only a very good hacker would be able to trace their origins. I didn't want it to be too easy. Sure enough, I wiped the folder with the staff and my name from Linda's company's servers. I also hacked and changed all the file transfers that were made from my laptop to show a different IP address. To prevent this from happening again, I ran a very nasty virus on my laptop and then disconnected it from my secret servers. Later that evening, when I went to check my email, I discovered that the virus had attacked my laptop from the spam I had opened and virtually destroyed it. I failed to mention the look of concern on Linda's face when she saw what had happened. The next morning, I saw a text exchange between Linda and James. Apparently, they were almost finished with the scam. They needed to make 2 more transfers to bring the amount up to $10 million and then trap me. The plan was to suddenly discover the theft. Of course, since Linda was the one who was supposed to discover it, she was the one who was supposed to lead the investigation. James, being the IT manager, was to lead the cyber part of the investigation. Unsurprisingly, it would have led straight to me. Linda, of course, filed divorce papers on me while I was in jail, then married James a year later. Both would have stated that they were in complete shock that I could have done something like that. Of course, there would be some suspicion as to Linda's possible involvement, but she would point to her investigation and discoveries and the fact that I must have kept my knowledge of computers from her. In addition, it should be obvious that she was victimized because I had specifically targeted her and used her to gain access to the company's computer systems. They both laughed, imagining me trying to answer questions about where the money went when I have no idea what the police are talking about. Linda also said she would get me a new laptop and that they could make the final transfers within the next 3 weeks. Now I knew how much jail time I was looking at. I went to my supervisor on Monday and told him I needed a week off for personal business. I had plenty of vacation time and he was a pretty cool guy, so that wasn't a problem. I scoured the internet to find the meanest, dirtiest, and most aggressive shark of divorce attorneys in town and made an appointment for the next day. They thought they had 3 weeks, but they would be lucky to make it 2 weeks. When I got home, I started up my computer and got to work. I logged onto James's home computer. If he was an IT expert, you'd think he'd have enough sense to turn it off and de-energize it when he wasn't using it. Nope. All he did was turn off the monitor. I controlled his computer through a server in Belarus. Not that it mattered, because the connection would have been erased anyway. His computer would have been the end of the trail for anyone who followed it. The cartel I went after 5 years ago had at least learned a thing or two about security. They changed their accounts and passwords, but they still use the same banks. Modernized passwords? They only work if you don't store them on your personal computers, which are vulnerable to phishing programs embedded in emails with links to products any multi-millionaire would want. This was just preliminary work. I'll wait until I'm done with Linda before I tackle James. James wouldn't survive this, and I still needed to use him to destroy Linda. I was still monitoring Linda's GPS in her car, so I was able to leave and go to the park for about an hour before coming home. She didn't need to know that I had taken a week's vacation. In fact, she probably did need to know, but I wasn't going to give her that information to try to save myself. As usual, I went to my store to work on the car. She left to run to Walmart to get me a new laptop. While she was gone, I did some preliminary work on setting it up. It was important for her to be at home when the computer was in use. If she could prove she wasn't home, she would have a defense to the crime. I couldn't let that happen. When I got home, she texted me that she had bought me a new laptop and told me it would take her about an hour to set it up for me. I thanked her and got to work. First, eliminate all ties to James. I hated her, but I still didn't want to see any real bodily harm done to her. James would likely be tortured and killed, and Linda would just go to prison for the next couple decades. Who knows? Maybe she'll enjoy being some bull lady's little bitch. Doesn't the saying go, gay is for staying? I used a separate server route to Linda's laptop. No roundabouts. Just a direct connection to her work computer and then to the company servers. $20 million was transferred from the company to 4 different accounts in her name. Next, travel plans were made. A one-way ticket was purchased for her for Thursday morning to the Cayman Islands. Before I stepped away from her computer, I deleted James from her contacts, erased all of her emails with him, and deleted all of her history from the account they originally used. Then I uninstalled all the spyware I had installed. It was a risk, but I didn't think she would have enough time to do anything too bad. Finally, I broke and erased the connection I had with her laptop. Having done all this, I remotely disabled the wireless router in the house. I had a separate, much better one at the store. Of course, she didn't know about it. A message from the spy program I'd installed on her phone popped up on the screen. Apparently, she'd finished setting up my laptop when the internet went down. She was just about to use my computer for another data transfer when the connection went down. I laughed. While they discussed the problem, I transferred all the money they had already stolen into new accounts I had created in Linda's name. Once the account was empty, I closed it. The last thing I did was delete the spyware from Linda's phone. I didn't know who would be looking at it later, and I didn't want anyone to know she was being spied on. Then I turned everything off and went to dinner. Tomorrow was going to be interesting, to say the least. When I walked into the house, Linda was, to say the least, a little flustered. She told me that my new computer was set up and ready to go, but that the internet wasn't working. I won't be able to log on and check my email until it's fixed. She had no idea how insignificant this problem was to me. That evening, she was busy throughout the movie. I watched with the corner of my eye as she played on her phone. I could almost feel her frustration growing. When asked if there was a problem, she just brushed it off, saying she was having trouble with a client at work. I suspected that she was trying to access the account and had failed. She was also texting someone. I smiled as I went to bed. There was no sex that night. The next morning, I was up and out of the house before Linda even left for work. Mostly, I just hung around idly until my meeting with the lawyer. I wondered how Linda's day had gone. I was to find out in a couple hours. Finally, I was ushered into the lawyer's office. You know that TV show where the handsome lawyer in the very professional but extremely sexy suit walks into the courtroom and hands his opponent's ass on a silver platter? That was my lawyer. 5'6" tall, angelic face, curves that would make a race car lose control, legs for miles, and breasts that could start a war. Within 2 minutes of meeting her, I realized she would be a barracuda in the courtroom. You could almost hear the chorus of heart in the room. After making sure everything was confidential, I explained that my wife had cheated on me throughout our relationship. Next, I told her about the embezzlement and the setup. She asked me how I knew all this, and I gave her an incomplete answer. I didn't lie, but I didn't tell her the whole truth. Okay, I lied. I told her I used my wife's laptop because mine wasn't working. Then I saw a folder with a bunch of pornographic photos, and then I found her emails to her lover. The emails were about her cheating and their embezzlement. I just wanted out of the marriage before any of this came to light. She agreed to take the case and started preparing the paperwork. She said she could probably file them by the end of the week. I told her to wait a little while. I suddenly had an idea and didn't want to reveal it too soon. We ended the meeting and I went home, started the system, restarted the home Wi-Fi, and got to work. I left the spy program on at Linda's work. Apparently, shit was heating up. First thing in the morning, there was an emergency meeting. A $20 million theft had been uncovered and an investigation was underway. By this time, I had managed to hack into James's phone. James traced the theft and discovered that it led straight to Linda. He also discovered that their account had been emptied and transferred to new accounts with $20 million received last night. The accusations were pouring in and there were no excuses. Suddenly, Linda received an email saying she was being summoned to a meeting with the CEO, CFO, and head of security. This should be interesting. The sound of several cars pulling into my driveway interrupted my fun. I turned off, made my way to the main part of the store, and locked the secret door. No need for anyone to be interested in this room. Yes, I put some lube on myself to make it look like I was working on my car. As I exited the store, I saw several police cars, as well as several large Chevy Suburbans. The cops were in their regular uniforms, but the people getting out of the big SUVs were wearing windbreakers with FBI written on the back. I wondered what this could be about. I barely glanced at the warrants and let them into the house. Of course, I offered any help I could since I had nothing to hide. Tour guide mode. Yes, this is my wife's computer. This one is mine, but it hasn't been used yet since we just got it yesterday, and the Wi-Fi wasn't working last night. By all means, take whatever you think you need. No, I have absolutely no idea what's going on. Sorry, I'm not very good with computers. Ask my wife and all our friends. I stopped realizing what was going on with Linda when I was taken to the police station and interrogated for several hours in the most rigorous manner possible. My story withstood all of that. After all, I was a simple truck driver with little or no knowledge of computers. No, I had no idea what my wife did for work. She was an accountant working with a few clients, but I didn't know who those clients were. What do you mean by a one-way ticket out of the country? Just for her? No, I have no idea why she would fly anywhere without me. It soon became clear to them that I knew nothing about what was going on. They searched my store thoroughly, but found no computer room. Eventually, they let me go home. Linda was arrested while I was being questioned. Poor James had to testify against her and also make sure that all the money was found and could be returned. He must have really felt cheated when he discovered that she had denied him access to the money, transferred it to her accounts, and then booked a one-way plane ticket and left the country, leaving him with nothing. Fortunately, I assumed I would be questioned. After all, I was her husband. It made sense that I could work with her on this. Of course, I was her only call. Being the dutiful husband that I am, I called and found her a lawyer. Yes, I made inquiries about every criminal defense attorney in town. Obviously, I needed to find the best attorney so I wouldn't accidentally screw up and hire one for her. No, I purposely hired one that was just below mediocre. I didn't hire the worst one because then I could appeal the poor defense in court. I wanted her to be convicted and serve the full sentence. The really cool thing is that this was a federal case. There is no parole or deferment for good behavior in federal prisons. If you're sentenced to 20 years in federal court, you spend all 20 years in federal prison, to this day. I attended her bail hearing and used the house as collateral. Since she was a flight risk, she had to wear a wrist monitor. As much as I hated her, I still managed to pretend to be a loving husband. Fortunately, she was too depressed and shocked by her situation to want sex. Her cell phone was confiscated for evidence, so I went down and bought her a new one. Yes, I took it to my store and installed my spyware on it before I gave it to her. Oddly enough, James blocked her number after she first texted him. He replied that he couldn't communicate with her because he was going to be called as a witness against her. Foolishly, she refused a plea bargain and insisted on a trial. She kept claiming that someone had set her up. In fact, she thought she would win because she didn't do what the evidence showed she did. She really didn't. Oh, she was guilty of embezzling half the money that was in that account, but not all the money, or using that particular account, or using her own computer, or buying a plane ticket, or suspending her partner. Of course, the money was found and easily recovered. From my perspective, the trial was fun. It was very interesting to watch James testify against her from the computer records. I could see his inner struggle when he had to testify against his lover while thinking that she had betrayed him and was going to run away and leave him. Linda, on the other hand, saw only that her soulmate was betraying her and sending her to prison. Throughout the 3 days of his testimony, I was overwhelmed with glee. I watched in silence as her love for him turned to hatred. On the witness stand, she did her best, speaking on her own behalf. Unfortunately for her, the evidence was too strong against her, and she was never able to come up with a plausible explanation. She would spend the next 20 years in federal prison. When the trial came to an end, it was time to take care of James. I had a very evil plan for him. He wasn't supposed to survive. Unfortunately, he would never know why it happened to him and that it was me. I couldn't take that risk. It was going to be fun. I asked the attorney to amend the divorce papers to reflect Linda's sentence and the fact that she would be in prison for the next 2 decades. A few days later, she was served with a summons. I opened several new accounts in Geneva, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands with links to James. Using the dark web, I left several subtle trails, all leading to James's IP address. The ghost returned 5 years later. Of course, the hacker chat rooms picked him up. Now comes the hard part. I had to leave a trail, but it didn't have to be obvious. I had to make it so that they wouldn't believe it was an experienced hacker, and they wouldn't believe it was me. But they also had to believe that I had made a small enough mistake that they could follow the trail. I had to go through 10 servers in 6 different countries. Eventually, I launched an army of bots and launched an attack on the first bank. Eventually, I got inside, found the 2 accounts I was looking for, and transferred them to James's new accounts. I then stopped the attack on the bank, severed and erased the connection to James's computer, and then logged into the darknet to observe the reaction. So far, I wasn't expecting anything, but it was better to be reassured. The next morning, another attack on another bank. 4 more accounts were emptied. The account I'd opened for James now had $20 million in it. People started looking for me. They wouldn't find me, of course, but they would eventually find Ghost. Several hacker forums on the dark web went dark. There was a North Korean group that seemed to be on the trail. It appeared to be the same group that had tracked me down 5 years ago. Time to call it a day. I went back to the banks. Sure enough, the third bank I looked in had the very account I was looking for. I bypassed James's computer and transferred $20 million into another account in Switzerland that I had created myself. Then I wiped all the fingerprints off that transfer. I didn't care if the cartel got the money back. I reconnected to James's computer and launched another attack on the bank with an account that had a beacon embedded in it. This time it was only $2 million. The money didn't matter, only the beacon attached to it. I got away with it last time because I knew about the thefts and could see how the tracker worked. If I didn't know about the money transfers, the accounts I had, and didn't know about the tracker attached to the last account, I would have gotten caught. I wonder how James will try to explain all this to them. I'd like to see them ask him where the money is when he had no idea what money they were talking about. It was time to sever the connection to his computer and erase all my fingerprints. It's been a week. I had cleared out my computer room and turned it into storage space. I was finalizing the paperwork for an apartment I'd purchased in Montana through a Subchapter S corporation, so my name wouldn't appear on the books when the news reported a missing person. It turned out that James hadn't shown up for work in days and no one knew where he was. His car was found abandoned in the parking lot of a mall, but he himself was nowhere to be found. I wonder where he could be. Well, I had to get back to packing. James. No! No! No, God, no! I screamed as they started hitting my testicles again. I swear I don't know what you're talking about! Nonsense, Mr. Ghost. You were wrong this time. The tracking program the hackers hired led us right to your computer. We found all the data on your computer. We recovered the $2 million from your last hack, but we want to know where the other $20 million is, as well as the $30 million from 5 years ago. You tell us that and we'll kill you quickly. You keep lying to us and it will get worse. But I don't know, damn it! They grabbed me as I was about to get into my car at the mall. I felt the prick of a needle in my neck and then nothing. I woke up a few hours later on a private jet, securely buckled in my seat. That's when the questions started. I had no idea what they were talking about. They kept calling me Ghost. They asked about the money they said I had stolen. There was $20 million that I had stolen a few days ago and another $30 million from 5 years ago. They didn't believe me when I said I didn't know anything. I just wet myself when they showed me the irrefutable evidence on my personal computer. I could give them the answers they wanted and die quickly, or they would turn the rest of my much shorter life into sheer agony. I shit myself when I realized that the answers I could give them didn't exist. Right now I was hanging naked somewhere deep in the jungles of Colombia. I really wish I could give them answers. I really don't want to know what happens tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, or the day after that. Mark. Moving day. James had been gone for a little over a month. His tortured body was found yesterday on the side of the road in Colombia. By the end of the day, Mark was supposed to be gone. I would assume my new identity after one more stop. I had already shipped everything I was taking with me. It was all going to a storage unit in Denver, paid for by wire transfer from an anonymous account. I'd pick it up by truck, paid for in cash. Linda was brought in and handcuffed to the table across from me. She didn't look so good. The orange color wasn't her color. No makeup. Her hair was a mess. She also had bags under her eyes. It looked like she hadn't quite gotten the hang of it yet. So, how are you holding up? I asked. Please, Mark. You have to help me. I didn't do what they said, she pleaded. Linda, I sighed. There's nothing I can do for you. Besides, we're getting a divorce. Please, Mark. I didn't do it, and I don't want a divorce. Just sign the papers, Linda. It's over. Please, Mark. Just talk to James. Try to ask him for help. He might be able to help me. I mean, we were friends once. Please, just ask him, she pleaded. You haven't heard of James? I asked. No. I kept waiting for him to come, but he never did. Well, he'll never come now. He was killed in Colombia. Her face turned white with shock. The authorities think he stole a lot of money from one of the drug cartels. No! He couldn't, she said. Probably not, but they seem to think they did. Now, Linda, you really should just sign the divorce papers and forget about it. But you leave me with nothing, she exclaimed. Sure. You don't need anything, and what are you going to do with everything you get? You're going to spend the next 20 years here, I explained. Please, Mark. You have to help me. I can't stay here. My cellmate is making me do something. I'm not gay. I need to get out of here. Please. It was time. Let me tell you a story, Linda. Perhaps it will help you. About 5 years ago, there was a very good hacker. He was called Ghost. The hacker got that nickname because he was so good at covering his tracks. It was literally like a ghost was invading a computer system. So Ghost decided to follow some drug cartels. It was actually a personal mission. Over $30 million was stolen from one of the cartels before the cartel hired other hackers to track down Ghost. Of course, Ghost noticed the tracking and shut down before he was discovered. Ghost disappeared and started a new life. Ghost ceased to exist and stopped tinkering with computers, except for minor hacking of systems to train and maintain technology. To everyone who knew him, he was pretty computer illiterate. Secretly, however, he was still as good as ever. Even his wife didn't know who he really was. Yes, he fell in love and got married. He truly loved his wife with all his heart. After being married for 3 years, he accidentally discovered that his wife did not love him. He discovered that she had been cheating on him throughout their relationship with her real boyfriend. And worse, he found out that his wife had only married him to set him and her boyfriend up to take the blame for the embezzlement they were engaged in. Her eyes were as big as dinner plates and her skin went completely white when I revealed her plan to her. Ghost decided he couldn't let that happen, so he devised a plan of revenge against the two men. First, he hacked into their computers, phones, and work network to get information. Then, he changed everything to remove his name from the scheme and blame all the evidence on his wife. He also made his wife's boyfriend believe she was cheating on him. The final nail for his wife was that he got her lover to testify against her and put her in jail for years, breaking their hearts and making them believe they had been betrayed by another. About the same way Ghost felt betrayed by his wife. You, she sighed. So, let's move on. Now that his wife was taken care of, it was time to deal with her lover. You see, the cartel was still looking for the Phantom. Why not get back at him and make the cartel believe they'd finally caught their prey? 2 birds, 1 stone, that sort of thing? Ghost used his wife's lover's computer, hacked into it, and stole a bunch more money from the cartel. Unfortunately for his wife's ex-boyfriend, Ghost was a little careless and made a small mistake. Ghost didn't completely erase the trail leading to the boyfriend's computer, and the cartel was able to trace the hack back to the boyfriend. Fortunately for Ghost, he was able to erase the trail leading to himself, and the guy's computer became the end of the trail. Authorities believe the guy was tortured for over a month before he finally left this world. Unfortunately for the guy, he just didn't have the information the cartel needed. None of this sounds real, implausible, and even more unprovable, but I thought a fictional story like this would help you get a handle on the situation. True, I believe you didn't do exactly what the evidence says you did, but no, you're not even close to innocent. Now just sign the papers. Just think how life would turn out if the wrong person happened to come across information that showed you were a prison snitch. I watched her face turn from white to red. You're a freak, she screamed, lunging toward me. There's a reason guards handcuff themselves to the desk. There's a reason the chains are short enough that the prisoner can't reach anyone on the other side of the table. I got out as she was being dragged away screaming. I got into a cheap abandoned car and drove to the mall. Once parked, I left the mark in the car and walked to the other side where my real car was waiting for me. With my new identity, I rushed away. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and watch the next video.